All right, my dear BIBLEin365 brothers and sisters, we have now embarked upon the book of Ezra. There's some really cool facts about Ezra before we get into the subject matter of the book that would probably be pretty useful to know. First of all, Ezra is actually a priest. Now, obviously, he was referred to as Ezra the scribe, but he was a priest and a scribe, which is very interesting. And of course, a very, very, very talented writer. As a matter of fact, many people believe that it was Ezra who was the one who wrote 1st and 2nd Chronicles. And of course, the book of Ezra. Some people even believe he wrote Nehemiah, but I think Nehemiah wrote Nehemiah, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But what is interesting about Ezra is that he is the great-grandson of a name you might be familiar with, and that's Hilkiah. Now, for those of you that might not know the name Hilkiah, he was the priest who 160 years earlier, with Jeremiah, led this young king by the name of Josiah in through a time of reformation of the nation of Israel. Of course, it's interesting. You can read about this a little bit in Kings and in Ezra. And what is very interesting about this amazing guy was he had a purpose that was remarkable. Now, understand this. When Ezra comes into the picture, he comes in a little bit later down the line, but yet what he does is remarkable because what his responsibility is to come in and to, in essence, build the temple. That's exactly what happened. Now, he came from Babylon into Jerusalem in 457 BC, which of course would have been roughly 80 years or so beyond the previous time that we have record under the leading of Zerubbabel going in. And this all becomes important because when you start looking at dates, this kind of stuff can be very important and actually very unique, right? But this is about 13 years before Nehemiah comes into the picture to actually continue to rebuild the walls of the city of Jerusalem. So Ezra comes in, and what you are going to read about in this book is the rebuilding of, in essence, the temple. Now, you will right at the very beginning of Ezra read, of course, the initial proclamation of Cyrus to actually go in and to start establishing and restoring that which is around Jerusalem. But what is very important is this was a proclamation to rebuild the temple. The proclamation that is of significance, according to Daniel chapter 9, is the one you read about in Nehemiah chapter 2, which was March 14th, 445 BC by Artaxerxes Longimanus. And of course, if you want to know what that means, go back and listen to my review on Daniel, and you'll be able to understand what prophetic word I'm actually talking about. Now, this is amazing because when we get into Ezra chapter 2, there is sort of a recollection of the people that have returned to actually start building in Jerusalem. But what is interesting is if you start looking at all the numbers that we can see in other accounts during this time, you might see a discrepancy of about 11,000 people that were not accounted for. And the reason for that is because we could be talking about people from the northern kingdom, right, which would have been Israel. Of course, all of it's been abolished at this point, and there may have been plenty of record outside of the tribe of Judah and a few other tribes, right? So this is why you might see that discrepancy. It's really not a discrepancy. It's just simply Ezra recording very specific people at a very specific moment in time, right? So we see the foundation for the temple being laid when we get into Ezra 3. In Ezra 4, we see the work being stopped for just a moment. And then, which by the way is really interesting because this really gives us good insight as into how we deal with opposition. You know, I know there's a lot of people right now who will stop at the first hint or smell of opposition, right? I remember when President Trump was not elected into office, there was a lot of people that says, I'm never going to vote again. I bought the My Pillow guy, pillows from the My Pillow guy, and I voted. I'm never going to do anything again when the hard left has been at it for 50 years, right? So the reality of it is Satan is unrelenting with us, and we need to understand that God is going to stand with us and give us the strength to endure, and we keep going, which brings us into Ezra 5 and 6, and that is when the temple is actually completed. And then, of course, as we get into the later chapters, we actually see the picture of what happens when Ezra makes his journey into Jerusalem. There's a very interesting documentation of what happens, especially under the leadership of Artaxerxes. Very interesting picture there. And then at the end of Ezra, you kind of get a sad picture of what happens when Israel begins to become acclimated to and accustomed to the behavior of their idolatrous neighbors. And so it's kind of a sad thing and sort of a sad ending. And then we get into the story of Nehemiah, which is what we're going to review here next. I believe it's the last book of the Bible assigned to you for reading, and kind of appropriately so. And I'll get into that when we get into the review of Nehemiah. But folks, you're going to love this as usual. CalvaryChapelSignalHill.com, JamesKaddis.com, or any other place where I have videos and Bible studies available. You can get my full teaching on the book of Ezra. You will love it. You'll be blessed by it. Ezra is an amazing book, and it is life-changing. So God bless you guys. Keep looking to him.